Peace to everyone. I've had a special request to go over portions of early history of the Creek Indians and their neighbors by John R. Swanton. The request has been specifically for covering the Natchez Tribe. And so I've marked off a bunch of pages, and I've also done the same with Creek Religion and Medicine, also by John R. Swanton. Two very important texts. Keep in mind that Swanton frequently quotes from earlier writers like Adair and also Milford, I believe, and whose book I have, by the way. I should read and do a review on that. Probably mentioned it before. So let's see, page 189. He mentions that in the second place, the names of almost all the other important Creek tribal subdivisions do occur alongside of the Tamahita. On the Decrene map and in the French census of 1750, the tribe is located among the lower creeks. He's referring to others earlier, alongside the Coweta, Casita, Apalachicola, Sawakali, Sochi, Eufaula, Okmulgee, Oconee, Hitchiti, Chiaha, and Tamatli. It's a tl sound, right? Adair gives them as one of a number of broken tribes said to have been incorporated with the creeks proper. And he seems to be familiar only with those living among the upper creeks. For the others mentioned in connection with them were all settled there: Tuskegee, Oakchai, Pecana, Wetumpka, Shawnee, Natchez, and Casati. Now, I think he's referring initially to the Yuchi at this point. I go to that part of the paragraph just to let you guys know that the Natchez are referred to as upper creeks. So, which makes sense because, as you'll find out, they had a lot of connection to Arbica or Abika. Okay, remember the R wouldn't have been pronounced. Okay, and then here we go under the section the Arbica. So the Arbica, or the Abika, as he spells it, constituted one of the most ancient divisions of the true Muskogee, appearing in the oldest migration legends. True, okay, I have that as well. Of the Confederacy. In ceremonial speeches, they are called Abikanagi, although what Nagi signifies, no one at the present time knows. They were also called the Door Shutters because they guarded the northern border of the Confederacy against attacks. Hawkins says that among the oldest chiefs, the name of this tribe was sometimes extended to the entire Creek Nation. DePratz, who, like Iberville, distinguishes most of the true Muskogee as Conchacks, I don't know about that, says that he believed that the terms Abika and Conchac applied to one people. So, yeah, there's the reference there. The relations of this tribe were naturally most intimate with the Coosa Indians. Hamilton quotes a Spanish manuscript of 1806, in which it is said that the Abika and Coosa were as one pueblo divided into two by swift rivers. Later, they adopted a large portion of the refugee Natchez, who ultimately became completely absorbed. Stiggins, himself a Natchez, has the following to say regarding the Abika and the people of their adoption. Let's see how much this covers here. Yeah, so the Abika tribe resides indiscriminately in the Talladega Valley with the Natchez tribe, they spell it differently, who they admitted to locate and assimilate with their tribe as one people, indivisible, a little more than a century ago. They at this day only pretend to know and distinguish their tribe from the mother's side of descent, but they are as one people with the Natchez at this time. And why may they not, by conjecture, be entitled to the claim of the primitive Muskogee more than any other of the tribes, for they are not discriminated by any ancient denomination that is known of. For their present appellation is derived from their manner of approving or acquiescing a proposition, though the national tongue is spoken by the tribe in all its purity, yet most notorious they assent or approbate that you may say to them in conversation with the long aspiration all, whereas the rest of the nation approbate or answers short call. Let's get linguistic here. I'm going to skip past that. And then he goes on about the Abika people, or the Abika people. I'm going to skip ahead now. Now we got some actual pages specific to the Natchez, so we'll go over that here. So the Natchez having been made the subject of a special study by the writer, no extended notice need be given here. Their earliest known home was on St. Catherine Creek, Mississippi, close to the present city which bears their name. After Louisiana was colonized by the French, the latter established a post among them, which was in a very flourishing condition when, in the year 1729, it was suddenly cut off by a native uprising. Subsequently, the French attacked these Indians, killed many, captured some, whom they sent to Santo Domingo as slaves, and forced the rest to abandon their old country and settle among the Chickasaw. When the French turned their attacks against the Chickasaw, the Natchez found it necessary to move again, and some went to the Cherokee, some to the Catawba, and some to the Creeks. Those who went to the Cherokee and Creek subsequently followed their fortunes, and the latter band was taken in by the Abika. They seem to have conformed in most particulars to the usages of their neighbors. Tate thus describes his visit to them on March 27th of 1772. I went this morning to Black Drink to the square, where I was kindly received by the headmen of the town, who told me to look on myself as being amongst my friends and not to be afraid of anything, for their fire was the same as Charlestown fire, and they never had spilt the blood of any white man. After that, I'd smoke tobacco and drink black drink with them. They desired that I might stay in their town all day, as they were building a hothouse and should have a dance in the evening, which they wanted me to see. In the evening, the hothouse, I'm curious about that. Okay? I don't want to assume that it's a sweat lodge, because a lot of people just, they throw in other non-Muskogee things into their Muskogee practices. So, but it is interesting. It says hothouse. Okay. In the evening, I went to the square where 13 Chickasaws had joined the Natchez and Creeks for the dance. The women, being dressed like warriors with bows and hatchets and other weapons in their hands, came into the square and danced round the fire, the polecat dance, 2 men singing and rattling their calabashes all the time. Now, I don't know if that's the rattle. I have to look that up now, but I'll do it later. The quote ends. The citation ends. So now Swanton goes on saying, although having separate towns, the Natchez and Abika are said to have intermarried to such an extent as to become completely fused. Since the scent was reckoned in the female line, the Natchez were still distinguished from the Abika through their mothers, and the language was transmitted thus for many years, but is now extinct. He contradicts himself later on about it being extinct. Among the Cherokee, the Natchez preserved their identity longer, and a few Indians remain who can speak their old tongue. Oh, I guess among the Cherokee, the Natchez still, at that time, in 1922, still had the language, okay? But it looks like among the Creeks, they had already lost their language, okay? My bad. Among the Creeks, some stories are still told regarding them. Jackson Lewis, whose, I think, grandson or great-grandson wrote the medicine book. David Lewis, Jr., Senior, anyway. So Jackson Lewis repeated a tradition to the effect that the Natchez were at one time hemmed in by the French, but all that could move men, women, and children escaped by wading through water. Then they went to the Chickasaw to live, but after a time they found some of their children who had gone out berrying, so collecting berries, run through with canes. Does that mean they were stabbed with spears? I don't know. Or were they shot with river cane arrows? I don't know. I'm not sure what that means exactly. This was done by the Chickasaw, who did not want the Natchez among them, so the latter moved on and came to where the Abika lived. They asked the Abika to take them in, and the Abika told them to, quote, enter the gates, unquote, and confer with the chiefs. The the Abika being the door shutters of the Confederacy. The Natchez did this and were adopted. They were allowed to settle with the Abika, according to one story, because the Abika were a very small people, perhaps having been reduced in the wars of the Cherokee. According to Adair, some Chickasaw moved with the Natchez, and the two occupied a town called Oyasa, somewhere near the upper course of the Coosa River. Now, here's the thing, this might be covered later on as well. I think that a bunch of it seems like the warriors among the Natchez might have it'll be covered later on, I'm pretty sure. I was doing some reading last night about this. Let me just go on and I'll cover that. So to these few notes, I will add the account which Stiggins gives of this tribe, which was not included in my bulletin above mentioned. It is of particular interest inasmuch as Stiggins himself was a Natchez Indian. It has not before been published. So he's taking Stiggins' account and he's publishing. He does the same thing, I believe was in this book, with G.W. Grayson's account of one of the Greencorns. Okay, so right here, so from Stiggins, the Natchez, the men of that tribe almost all converse in the Creek tongue with their families or not. Though the women can speak it fluently, yet most generally in their own common concerns, and to their children they use their own native tongue. So the Natchez language is what they typically teach their kids at home. Frequently in one house they use both tongues without any detriment to the conversation or business. It's like Spanglish. It's like, bilingual households, right? The tradition they relate as the cause of the removal from the seat of their nativity to their final settlement on the Talladega River, I will relate as I heard it. That about 1 century ago, that the tribe lived in one large body or tribe on the bank of the Mississippi, where the present city of Natchez now stands, and extended above it, that their government was monarchical, so they had a king, and that all cases, both civil and political, were determined by the king and his suite, for he was attended by both men and women in great state. The throne was hereditary, and the king was supreme head of the tribe. His person was sacred, and his mandates inviolable. He lived in a retired manner in the suburb of the town, secluded from the society of all persons but his own near relations, who officiated about his person, both men and women, as attendants and guards. About 1/3 of his connection at the time, and such as were not in attendance on his person, were in the forest in search of game for his subsistence. Wow, must be nice. Okay. During the hunting excursion, the party was headed by one of his near relatives to direct and take care of the party. But it must be noticed that all earthly institutions, though made for lasting happiness of ages, are delusive and visionary. So it happened to them. For while they are living under their peaceable and happy institution of government, a government familiarized to them by time and consonant to their habits of life, they received a visit from a detachment of French who went up to the river Mississippi, says, to explore the country and fix on an eligible spot to erect a garrison, and without a previous compact with the natives to ensure their goodwill. They pitched on a site in the vicinity of the town. Though much against the will of the Indians, they disguised their chagrin and seemingly were careless and not opposed to the encroachment of their unwelcome visitants and neighbors who had fortified themselves in the suburb below the town. The French, by their gallantry, pursued the destructive course said to have been in Sodom of olden times. Okay. As though danger was not embroiling nor destruction awfully pinning over their ill-fated heads, they made free with the men and married their women. What does that mean? Made free with their men and the sin of Sodom. Okay. Yeah, I don't want these people out too. I'm sorry. On both counts. On all counts. So married their women. They were tolerated in their love to their women, but seemingly goodwill by the natives, for they saw the advantage that would ultimately result through their blind devotion to love, for it would make them unsuspicious and unguarded against a design they had in contemplation to effect through the means. As was expected, their lewd practices soon caused a relaxation of their vigilance and discipline So the French were just like, oh, we're horny, we're just gonna hang out and do our thing, and nobody, and we'll just, be romantic and whatever, and and everything's gonna be fine. Anyway, um, uh, so for they frequented the town at night in a careless manner and unguardedly admitted the women into the fortress at night and made them welcome visitants at all times. The Indians saw how remiss and negligent the French were getting in their manner of living, as was expected, and they, for revenge, secretly and exultingly proceeded to put their scheme into execution, which was to exterminate their gallant and unwelcome neighbors. Therefore, it's like gallant's referred to in a bad way here, right? Therefore, the Indian men concerted a plan with their women, as though without design, for the women to make their appointments with the Frenchmen to be and stay within the fortress on such a night, which appointment was accordingly made and the garrison overreached. For when the time arrived, instead of the expected women, the fortress was entered by men in disguise and armed. They disguised themselves as women? Is that what happened? Who on entrance instantly fell to work and exterminated the whole garrison of men. Good. Sorry, but good. But it also backfired. One man escaped because his loving wife, right, wishing to save him, had prevailed on him to stay with her in the town that night, and after the above catastrophe, she effected his escape down the river Mississippi. So he carried the news of the disaster to his comrades and to his countrymen. So she's a traitor. You're going to see what happens. The Indians were very much elated with the successful event of their plan, which had even exceeded their most sanguine expectations, getting clear of their intruders so quickly and easily without the loss of any of their own blood. So they killed them all except for one guy, right? And they're like, yeah, it's great. Everything's none of us died, But their joy was of short duration. They equipped themselves with the spoils of their vanquished neighbors in arms, clothing, provisions, and hats, which the last they particularly admired, and they did not suppose they were any more to revenge their horrid deed. In their enthusiasm to take possession of their empty garrison that they had so easily attained, they unanimously concluded and even prompted His Majesty and all his suite and all that can get quarters to remove therein, as the buildings were more commodious than those of the town. Then, after they had arranged their new habitation and gotten all snug and secure, the king sent out the usual hunting party, headed by one of his nephews. Not a care in the world. But after their hunting excursion was over and they returned, behold, their surprise at seeing a number of ships moored in front of the fort, and apparently the whole of their tribe in the act of embarking on board of the shipping under the guard and control of 2 rows of white men with their hats similar to those worn by the people that they destroyed. From the following circumstance, I can expect that the whole tribe was not captured, as there is a people on the south waters of the Missouri who call themselves Natchez, who probably made their escape when those in the fortress were surrounded and captured. All that were shipped off by the French were insulated and settled in the islands of Santo Domingo, where their progeny now remain. Their arms, offensive and defensive, were bows and arrows pointed with either sharpened bone or pieces of flint. With these weapons, they attacked their enemy or killed their game for subsistence. When those that had been hunting returned and saw the tribe of on the ship and saw them disappear on the river, they could not imagine that what would be their destination and fate. So in their incertitude and perplexity of mind, they concluded to leave their forlorn case with the seat of their ancestors forever, and in the scenes of a new and untried home, forget the wreck of their tribe, who they expected were doomed to slavery and wretchedness. Having had intercourse and friendship with the Chickasaws, they moved to them first, where they took up their abode, and some with the Cherokees, it says, and Chickasaws. But the greater part, headed by the royal family, made a compact and assimilation with the Abicas, or Creek tribe, and settled in the Talladega Valley. They remained thus sequestered for about 25 years, when, at the instance of their chief, they made a final exit and settled in the valley, and by their compact became a member of the Ispokoga body. which they have remained down to this period. This remnant of the Natchez tribe to this distant day are unfriendly to the French people. Their ancient manners and customs, it is said, were similar to those of the Abikas, so they had to make no change in their habits of life by their removal. These statements were handed down by the most ancient to the present day by their forefathers, who were spectators, though in their infancy, of what had happened and to and in their tribe. They have a belief in a supreme being, but no worship or adoration. Though they generally talk about good and bad across in life, I could never understand that they had any idea of rewards or punishment in the future, for they generally believe in another life here on a place they cannot describe. They keep the Busk festival in a very devout and sacred manner near one of the towns in the valley not far from Soto's fortifications. There's a cavern said to be near a quarter of a mile long and much dissected. Such Indians as have been in it say that it's people by fairies. Okay, not homosexuals, by the way, but pixies, or maybe in this case, the little people. Some call them the Indian leprechauns. So little people that are mentioned in other books that supposedly are real, and only you can see your little person. No one else can see them. Things like that. There's legends about that. So, they have never seen any because they have the power of making themselves imperceptible. Okay, yeah, that's what it's referring to. The Indian leprechauns, basically, but fairies being an incorrect term. Okay, but they have seen their tracks and know that they live on the innumerable bats and swallows that lay in there. Oh, man. It was entered by some men many years since. This is a half century ago, or that is a half century ago. They found the bones of a human being in the first room, and right by him, carved in a rock, I.W. Wright, 1723. I would say that the fact that there's so many hunters that found the ruins of their people and just had to leave. You have people that swam away from the French. There's one account of that. So you definitely have Natchez women and children along with the men who got away, according to one account. But then on this account, you're hearing that, the men showed up from the hunting party and, well, can't help my people. They're all going to Santo Domingo slaves. So we're going to disappear. It makes sense that when they intermix with the Arbika people, that they would have, if the Arbika had been decimated prior, their numbers diminished significantly. If you had a bunch of Natchez men marrying Abika women, then the Abika women, their children would have become Abika. They would not have been Natchez by tribal town affiliation at that point. So at that point, they just increased the numbers of Abika people by knocking up the women. But then what happens with the Natchez women? Are they marrying Abika men? Are they still married to Natchez men? Like, what's going on? Like, what, I don't know. That might be lost to history, okay? Continue on with the same account from Stiggins. In the beginning of my narrative, I said as a prelude, I would intersperse an occasional tradition. Therefore, I will relate one retained by the Natchez tribe and related by them as a matter handed down through successive generations for their information. I insert it to show its connection and inference that in olden times, their patriarch knew or heard in some way of the deluge, and that the primary information or knowledge he had of it had got blended with traditional fiction. It is said that speech and rational power is given to man alone, and he, by his knowledge and understanding, is enabled to make the other creatures subservient to him, so that he rules and manages them in a way most conducive to his will and their comfort in life. But when the gift of speech is imparted to a dumb creature, it is to be observed as a matter of inspiration to the beast, purposed by the great spirit of the words. Sorry, small text here. I'm trying to. I have 20/20 vision, but I'm trying to do this. So But when the gift of speech is imparted to a dumb creature, it is to be observed as a matter of inspiration to the beast proposed by the Great Spirit to be words of sacred truth from himself through said creature. So animals don't speak, but when they do, it comes from God, basically. As a manifest proof, which sounds biblical, by the way, just like the deluge is a biblical thing. So as a manifest proof of the foregoing remarks, it is said that there was a large assemblage of the ancients on some particular occasion in times of yore, when, to their surprise, they were accosted by a little dog, who, having gaped and yawned in a particular whining manner, began to articulate words to bemoan their sudden fate. He called on them individually to look between his ears first toward sunset and then in every other direction to see their fate. They looked accordingly, as he said. They could see nothing, but on a second bidding, they could see mountains of water rolling towards them. He bade him who could fly to the mountains for safety and escape death, so they fled. Only a few of them reached the mountains, however, most being overtaken and overwhelmed by the waving torrent of water. Among them, the old man of sorrow, who was one who escaped by his flight to the mountains. He is called in their tongue Tam Sial Hos Opa. He uttered his wailings and lamentations continually, and in tears of sorrow he mourned for all that perished, and his sorrow likewise extended to the living, whom he took under his care and instructed them by good works how best to live in future in order to shun the paths of destruction. The earth was overwhelmed by the billows of water, and no one survived that did not attain the summit of the mountains. So instead of there being an ark, they're saying it was a mountain, and everything else got flooded. Okay, from these was the earth repeopled. Who this old man of lamentations of sorrow was may be a question, but as I never heard any more of him, I shall leave him, and as I heard him, without any conjecture relative to him, to be solved by the inquisitive and the Ancient of Days. So that's the end of that account, right? So then Swanton goes on saying, in 1796, the trader of this town was Joseph Stiggins, as above noted. In 1797, the traders were James Quarles, who had, quote, the character of an honest man, unquote, and Thomas Wilson, a saddler. It is not generally known that John Stewart, Indian agent under the British government, at one time formulated a proposition to restore these Indians to their old home near Natchez, Mississippi. His suggestion is outlined in a letter dated December 2nd, 1766, in the following terms. This consideration that the Choctaw might at any time obstruct the navigation of the Mississippi suggested to me the advantage which might arise to His Majesty's service from collecting the scattered remains of the Natchez and giving them a settlement in their own country again. There may be from 150 to 200 gunmen of them remaining in the Cherokee Creek and Chickasaw nations. They still retain their language and customs, as well as the strongest resentment for the expulsion and, in a great measure, the destruction of their nation by the French. Anyway, so let's see here. Elsewhere it mentions so it goes on. The French writers hold the Chickasaw, or the British traders through them, responsible for in large part of the Natchez uprising of 1729, and from what Adair tells us, there was evidently grounds for the accusation. In any rate, after the Natchez had been defeated and driven away by the Louisiana French, the latter turned their attention to the Chickasaw as allies of those implacable foes, and Bienville undertook to crush them by two simultaneous movements against their towns from north to south. The movements were not synchronized, however, and resulted in utter failure. Chickasaw things happen. All right, I'm going to skip ahead. Let's see. So the Chickasaw on their side are said to have 60 killed, but felt this so keenly that, according to Andrews, a Cherokee trader, they had, quote, had quitted their lands and were drawn near to the Creeks who received them kindly, unquote. This, however, may refer to the Natchez because the bulk of the Chickasaw certainly remained in the same situation, right? As aforementioned, they hung out with the Chickasaw for a while. Possibly their children got abused by the Chickasaw, and so they left. So there's all these different references. The truth is always somewhere in the middle, right? And then the last thing it mentions in here, there's like, goes over some of the census of the different, Creek towns. It lists Natchez on here. So like on the census of 1760, there's like 20 men. 1772, as far as gunmen, there's 30. And then 1792, you got like 110 men. That's, pretty much like, that's what this mentions, okay? We'll get into a couple other things here. I realize this video is getting pretty long, but okay, so in Creek Religion and Medicine, page 478, which is like, this far into the book, because again, this is part of the bigger text originally. Comets were thought to portend war. Some Natchez and Cherokee beliefs regarding them may be inserted. In the language of the former, a comet, so that'd be the Natchez, a comet was called Anshsuna, chief of war. It is believed to portend trouble for the whole people and a short life for the chief or for the white man's president. The Cherokee are said to have called it the Big Lion. With them, it was also a sign of war. The following story of a comet illustrates, let's see, I don't know if I want to go into all that. The following story of a comet well illustrates the belief regarding such bodies and incidentally shows the small value of information when it comes from superstitions. Sam Watt was my chief Natchez informant. Yeah, I don't really want to go over all that right now. This goes into Creek and Cherokee stuff, not necessarily Natchez. So I'm trying to stay focused on Natchez. Okay, we've got, so where are the Natchez mentioned here? I'm kind of trying to skim through this page. Okay, so on page 42. But while there's probably some truth in this view, it's pretty clear that from the statement of early writers and mention of the one above by the Chitimacha, so one above, it's Ofanga, or Ibofanga, that's God in the Muskogee language, okay? So by the Chitimacha, Arakapa, and most of the other southeastern peoples, that they recognize a chief among these. Such a being was undoubtedly believed in by the Natchez, for their entire social system was revolved around him, and there is every reason to think it was a prevailing southern belief. Yeah. So, give me 1 second here. Oh yeah, of course, the earlier page it mentions Ibofanga. So, and this book was written, the other one was 1922, this one, I believe 1924 is what it's saying here. Yeah. So, anyway, moving on. I want to get through this. So the section on charms is kind of interesting. Among these objects, which are rather means of securing supernatural help than active helpers themselves, the sabia, or sabia, I'm not sure how you pronounce that, were the most important, and they are said to be known of all the 5 civilized tribes. I've heard them personally among the Creeks, Alabama, and Natchez. They were very small objects looking like crystals, and when properly treated, would bring the possessor success in any emergency of life, in public speaking and in war, and particularly in hunting and in love. Okay, if the owner of the sabia asked for a thing, he would never be refused. The Texas Alabama, which is the Alabama Coshada, right, claimed that with them, it was only a love charm and had nothing to do with hunting. However, it was also However, it was a saying that anything that will charm a deer will charm a woman. The word is said to convey the impression of a group of men staring off somewhere, men starting off carrying some particular article, but its origin may have had nothing to do with this. The best account of it was obtained from Jackson Lewis, again, and its substance is as follows. So I'll go over that a little bit here. There are different kinds of sabia: white, blue, red, yellow, and one that is nearly black. All have a luster like that of glass, except the black, which looks like a graphite of a lead pencil. The red and yellow sabia are considered the strong ones, or the males. The white and blue are the females. If one sits down and watches them a moment, they gleam and flash as if they were live things moving about. Lewis owned a white sabia and also a blue one for a long time, but sold them when he partially lost his eyesight. Upon one occasion, he took one of these out, laid it upon the table, and was about to touch it with the point of his penknife when it sprang off to a distance of 2 to 3 feet, like a thing alive. Whoa! According to tradition, sabia and the knowledge of how they should be used came from a yamase. Don't get me started about Miko Seku Gentle, the Yamase people, another pretendian, right? Came from the Yamase, so that in singing the long song which goes with them, but is not used much on account of its sacredness, the word Yamase continually occur. The word Yamase continually occurs. The sabia was kept in a little piece of buckskin along with red paint. And when a man went out hunting, he opened this up, took a little red paint out of the end of a match or straw, and put it on his cheek. Then the deer did not seem wild, and there was little trouble experienced in finding and shooting them. This is not done until one has gotten a little distance from camp, and the action is accompanied by a song intended to make the deer approach. Another song may be sung to blind the deer after one has seen him, so that you can get as near to him as possible before shooting. During the sabia songs, the charm itself is not unwrapped. Some sabia now in use are said to have been obtained from the Yamase, while others are reputed to have been born upon a plant which grows in out of the way places. This plant has minute seeds which fall off where they are ripe and form such crystals. Numerous songs were connected with this charm, and it is said that one could never finish telling the myths concerning it. Sometimes the sabia is found whirling around or on gravelly or sandy soil and acting as if it were alive. I'd love to see one of these things, but anyway, that's enough with that one. Okay. Okay, so it gets into a little bit of taboos. Okay, so a few miscellaneous beliefs bearing upon taboos may be added, obtained principally from the Natchez doctor so frequently quoted. I'm not sure which Natchez doctor he's frequently quoting, unless he's talking about Mr. Jackson Lewis. I don't think it was Natchez, but I could be wrong. If a doctor ate the head of a turkey, gnats and similar flying insects would come about him so closely and in such numbers as to interfere with his vision. If he ate the tail of a deer, the deer would become wild, and the hunter could not approach them. Nothing half-cooked and nothing young was to be eaten, nor should one wash his face with soap or bathe in warm water. On the contrary, he must go to cold running water in the morning, even though it were covered with ice, and breaking the ice, if necessary, plunge into that. I've heard of people bathing in ice water in more recent times. It's a fad right now. He must go in when daylight first showed itself and remain until the sun was up. This, of course, applies to the baths universally taken in the Southeast every morning and may be overdrawn in details. An individual taboo of my informant, or means of obtaining luck, was to drink from a cup held in his right hand while he faced the east. The Natchez and Cherokee ate their food cold, believing it was better for their teeth. The Welsh did the same thing, by the way. I like having hot food sometimes, but you know, it's better it's not too hot. Okay. Actually, I think the Welsh would actually eat their porridge lukewarm, and they brush their teeth all the time. Anyway, it's interesting to see that connection here. Okay. Oh yeah, breaking wind was associated with manliness. Interesting. All right. So I'm going to go on to the last section here, which I believe is medicine. I may not read all this. Let's see. Yeah, Natchez medicines. The following medicines were enumerated to me by one of the few surviving Natchez Indians. As the latter are living among the Cherokee, it is probable they are as much Cherokee as Natchez, and indeed, for some of them, I could obtain only the Cherokee names. Unless otherwise stated, the native name is Natchez. Cherokee name Kauai used syphilis medicine, a species of ascarum popularly known as St. Andrew's Cross. A tea was made from it and given to children to pass urine. What are children doing with syphilis? Is that what it's saying here? I don't know. That's kind of scary if that's the case. Okay. Poxpa ugubic, which is in Latin to be Tristram verfoliatum, popularly known as horse gentian and locally as pleurisy root. While this is a medicine plant, my informant did not know how it was employed. So I'm not going to go over all of these because this goes on to the next page and it just goes down a list of, I mean, I'll just maybe go down, you know, there's medicine for kidney trouble and Bright's disease. There's medicine for if you're bewitched. Oh, there's also one to rub on your face and make you young. Okay. Sounds like some of the stuff we got going on today. One for fevers. There's some that doesn't say what the disease is. Oh, wait a second. One of the plant is eaten in winter, it is said to will be proven fatal because at that season the snakes put poison into it, but in the summer it is used as medicine, though the informant didn't say for what disease. Yeah, interesting. There's medicines for boils. There's one for women during their monthly periods. You've got fever medicine, jaundice, whooping cough, consumption, coughs and colds, syphilis, another one for syphilis. What the hell's going on here, man? Dysentery, coughs and colds. Won't say what. Swellings of the legs, mumps, breast, pain in the shoulders, breast and back. Pneumonia. Scurvy, fevers. Children having worms. Okay. Oh yeah, devil shoestring, which is among the creeks is used for poisoning fish. That's one that's used to, it drugs them so people can just go and grab fish. And it's used in a powderized form. So, but in the, I guess in the Natchez language, Anu Tsenu, I don't know. I'm having a hard time pronouncing Natchez words. I think everyone's having a hard time pronouncing Natchez words, okay? Just one for liver, for pains in the side. And of course, it mentions that songs with appropriate words must be employed in administering all of the above medicines. There are songs and chants that go along with the stuff. You don't just use the medicine itself typically, although some people will take, you know, these medicines and make aspirin and Tylenol out of some of the stuff, right? But because all this stuff came from the natural world, right? But as far as, like, you probably don't have a Hilishaya at Tylenol's factory, you know, doing a chant on the stuff. So I think there's different ways of making the medicine today, but as far as like the way they use it then, that purportedly healed people, there was songs associated with it, certain keywords that had to be said when doing it. So, and I think blowing 4 times, not, you know, twice or less, was kind of key because of the number 4 rather than how much medicine you're blowing on. Anyway, that's not covered in this as far as I know. But anyway, that's pretty much what we got as far as the Natchez people. I mean, it's pretty good information, a lot of information in these 2 books. So I hope you like it, and I hope that was helpful. And hopefully, if anybody has any other sections they would like me to read, like the on the what is it, the Atusi, the Atasi as they call it, which is the Artusi, or the Abika, which are the Arbika, you know, people, or others, please let me know. And yeah, I'll do what I can to find the time. I was fortunate enough today to have the time to make this so far almost 47-minute video. So I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm going to go get some breakfast. Kind of late doing that. And I'll go about the rest of my Sunday. So, Mado for watching. And Hadam Chicha, please.